Hi, this is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about how the success I had restoring an Esterbrook J pen that I found in a local antique shop led me down a rabbit hole. Which led to me acquiring a number of Esterbrook pens and putting together a kit that I use to restore and freshen up my vintage pens of all types. I'll begin by saying I never really intended to acquire a collection of Esterbrooks after I got this one in working order and got a nib for it that was in a size that matched my style of writing or suited my style of writing. I was perfectly content. I like green, and this is a beautiful green pen. But when I found out that I was going to be attending the St. Louis Pen Show, I thought, hey, I could get a few Esterbrook pens and fix them up and sell them at my table along with the pens from my collection that I was going to include in the sale. And as I collected more and more, I bought them off of eBay. I just could not stop myself. I would find a good deal and repair them, get them looking good, and find another good deal. I ended up selling 4 pens in the pen sale, and I think these are two new ones that I've acquired since the St. Louis Pen Show. But I've kind of slowed down on my acquisition. I bought some more nibs. I ended up buying some boxes of nibs in sizes that I like or that I wanted to try. But in today's video, I'll go over my kit. Okay, first of all, I want to say that most of my pen restoration tools and supplies came from Anderson Pens, and I just recently learned that Anderson Pens is going to be closing their store at the end of December. Actually, I'll put down here, I'll put on the screen the date that they said they're going to be closing. That, to me, is heartbreaking because Anderson's has been a wonderful resource for information and the repair supplies. And you know that these are the real deal. They stand behind their supplies because that's what Brian uses in his pen restoration work. So that I really hated to hear. So if you're interested in any pen restoration and you're needing some supplies, I encourage you to go ahead and get on the ball and get your resources before they close up their shop. Because I had found that their resources were very affordable, and I've got a few things that I'm needing to pick up from them before they close up the shop. Now, I'm not an expert on pen restoration by any stretch of the imagination. I'm here to tell you that you don't have to be an expert to get into something like this. I don't know what the best or the easiest vintage pen might be to get into this pen restoration part of the hobby, but I can tell you that the Esterbrook J pen, to me, was a very nice pen to start with. It's a sack filler, and that had always intimidated me, but once I did the first sack repair, I thought, this is doable. You'll have to excuse my dog. I'm in my bonus room above the garage. We've adopted another dog, a friend for Marshall, and she's in the garage right now. But if you're getting into sack fillers, you'll need some sack shellac. And so it comes in just a little fingernail polish bottle. That's a simple way to apply the shellac to the section. And this is enough. You saw how many pens I had restored, and you can't even tell that I've used any out of this bottle. So that's something you'll need. gripper tools, something for gripping, and I don't have any of these yet, but there are section pliers. Those are available from time to time. I don't know if Anderson's will be getting any more of those since they're kind of wrapping things up, but if you can come across some, those are nice to have, or I imagine would be nice to have. Let's see, I've got some tissues. Some people use razor blades for trimming the ink sac. I have found that these just hair scissors are nice and sharp, and they make nice clean cuts. That has worked well for me for trimming up ink sacs. Here are some that I haven't used yet. They're a little bit too long, and so let me get one that you can see. Here's an old sack that I removed from a J pen, and so I've got several of these. What's amazing to me, some pens you'll get and the ink sac is just brittle, just crumbles to pieces, but I've had several pens that the original sac, look at this, it's still nice and pliable, and so I use this to measure how long I need to cut the sack. So that's handy. Let's see. Now this is optional depending on how nice you want to polish up your pen. I got some micro gloss from Anderson pens. And I always have to look it up. One of them is more abrasive than the other. The more abrasive one, you use it first, and it gets the deeper scratches out. And it might leave the pen looking a little dull. And then the less abrasive one is a finer abrasive, and it will shine the pen up to a more glossy finish. So I got one of each of those. I got a polishing cloth. I use this some on the nibs, just to get a little of the, if there's some surface. I don't use this for cleaning the nib. I clean up the nib with soap and water and a toothbrush. But if there's maybe some corrosion on the nib or something a little more tougher to get off, I'll use this for that. And I'll also use this some on the pen body itself. They have these that you can get, the little nail buffer. These are good for polishing nibs. I already had some micro mesh from Goulet. This is one of the first things I got I got it fairly early on when I got into fountain pens, and micro mesh is a game changer. If your nib is just a little bit, not to your liking, a little scratchy, that is a game changer. I've got some masking tape for masking off parts of the pen, like masking off threads. You don't want to use anything abrasive on the threads, so I'll mask those off when I'm polishing the pen up. I've got some talc for putting on the sack after I've installed it. I've got a couple of silica packs in here to prevent any moisture. I've got a bamboo skewer and some toothpicks. I've got a bunch of Q-tips for just little odds and ends, getting into little crooks and crevices to clean, and to sometimes I use a toothpick with some polishing compound to get little scratches, to focus on a little scratch. I have a clothespin in here that I needed. There was something, I had a little thin pen, I remember what it was. I don't know if I still have the pen, but it was one of these little skinny J pens, and I don't know if it was this one. I can kind of feel right here there's a bulge, and so I used a hairdryer to kind of warm up the material and then put a clothespin on it to kind of reduce the amount of that bulge, and it helped. You use things around the house to you improvise, I guess I'm trying to say. I've got a little LED flashlight. That comes in handy. I also have a loop. It's over with my other pen stuff, but when I went to the pen show and took this kit, I had my loop in there. When I first got this pen up and writing, I tried different inks in it, and I have found that this, now it may just be to this pen in particular, I don't know how representative this would be for all Esterbrooks, but I found that this feed writes nice and wet, but I've also had a little bit of trouble with inks drying out in the nib, and then you go a day without writing, and then it's hard starting. So I went back to the basics. Everyone says use Waterman Serenity Blue if you're having nib problems. Well, I prefer Mysterious Blue. I just like the color of it, and I have heard people say that since Mysterious Blue has a little bit of a sheen to it, that it's not as good as Serenity Blue, but for my pens, I've had no trouble. I don't have hard starts. Mysterious Blue is my go-to ink for these older vintage pens. I've got some replacement nibs. I've got a box of broad stubs. This is just cute as all get out. Each nib is in their own individual box. So I think I sold 2 spare nibs when I was at the pen show, and I sold 4 pens. Let's see. I've got a fine stub, broad stub, fine stub. This is my favorite nib size, the fine. And I thought, let me see. This is also a fine. I think this is a little more rigid. I think this was the one that's supposed to be used. I need to make a notation on the screen, but I think this one was designed to be used for clerical work. I'll look it up and put it on the screen. This, I think, is called a firm fine, but I don't think it's the most rigid. I think it feels a little softer. Now, yeah, that's a 2556. This one came with a medium nib, and it was, I like my fine nibs, and this one had a little bit of a crease in it, so I was worried about, one of these days that side of that tine is probably going to break off. I've had no trouble with it. It writes really nice. It writes really wet. For someone who likes a medium or a broad nib, I think they would really like this nib. But I write kind of small, so I bought a used 2556, the firm fine, and it is on my blue pen right now. But it's the nib I write with. I move this nib around to whichever pen I'm writing with. And it's used, and it writes kind of like a very narrow, a very fine architect. It's got an architect type character to it. Oh, I love this nib. That's probably part of what makes me love these Esterbrook pens so much. I found the nib that is suited to me. And I just have a thing for pens that you can swap out nibs easily. Threaded nib sections that are interchangeable. Wait a minute. That's not my blue. Here is my blue pen. Another thing I like about these Esterbrook pens is the material. Now, one thing you have to watch out for when you're looking at these on eBay, I've had a lot of people describe a pen, it's kind of warped. And this pen, if you just glance at it, it looks like it might be a little warped, but that's just the material can give sort of an optical illusion. Like if I squint and hold this up to a light so that I can't see the material, it's a perfectly straight pen. But a lot of these Esterbrooks, if you look at them on eBay listings, you might think, that pen's kind of warped. But no, it's just the pattern of the material. Now, a good thing about this, marbly type material is it really hides imperfections. My green pen doesn't have hardly any scratches on it. It feels really smooth. Now this one, it's really smooth, but you can feel that there's some scratches down here, and I don't know if I'm even going to be able to show it. Oh, there you can see it. I think someone chewed on the end of this one. There you can kind of see it. But I smoothed it out so that you can still feel the scratches, but they're smooth. Another imperfection on this pen, see that little divot that's out of it? I polished it. Again, I used a toothpick to kind of get in there and get the edges. It's nice and smooth. You can't hardly feel it. I just know that there's an imperfection there, so I know to look for it. But this pen is just so beautiful. If you don't know where the imperfections are and don't know to look for them, you're not going to notice it. So these are my two favorite pens. This one's special to me because it's the first one. I found it in an antique shop, and it led to this whole rabbit hole that I've gone down. And then this blue one, I just like the way it looks. I like the material. And especially since I use a blue ink, that's just so nice. These will probably be two that I keep forever. The rest, if I sell them, fine. If not, I'll enjoy using them. Okay, let's look at some more stuff that I have in here. I've got some wire brushes that I had around the house that I've got a wire brush and, the, whatever this material is, vinyl, whatever material for getting crud off the pens. Most of these pens, when I get them, are horrible. They've been sitting in a drawer somewhere, probably for decades. The ink is all dried and crusted in the threads, and so I don't use this so much on the pen bodies. This is more for scrubbing metal, like scrubbing a dirty spot on the nib. You don't want to scrub too hard though. This gets used the most though. I used this on like a J-bar. If I have to pull a J-bar out and it's rusty, I'll use this to scrub some of that rust off. But this I use for threads and for 99% of the scrubbing that I need to do on a pen. I have a couple of these blunt tip syringes, so I keep one of them in my kit. And I use this for cleaning out a pen. I don't have to clean out these pens as much since I just use one kind of ink. I'm not swapping out inks. But when I do clean one out, if I'm going to clean it out for storage to put it away, instead of using the lever to suck up water, expel it, suck up water, expel it, since you can remove the nib so easily, I just use a syringe to squirt water up there in it until it comes out clean. Now you don't want to stick the nib in, or you don't want to stick the needle in there too far and puncture the sac, but just barely stick it up in there and squirt some water. Another tool I have found quite useful is my little pocket knife. And I use this quite a bit for those brittle ink sacs that, let me see. This one's been cleaned off, but if you have a pen that has a brittle ink sac, part of it will still be glued around here, and I just use my knife to chip away at that until I get it all cleaned off. It takes a little while, and you need to wear eye protection, I have found, because those little shards of hardened rubber or latex, or maybe it is rubber, I don't know, those older sacs, they really kind of fly in all directions, but they usually come off pretty easily with this little knife. I've got some brass shims for flossing the nib slit and getting that cleaned up, getting any residue or fibers out of there. Another tool that I forgot to mention that usually lives in my toolkit, but that I had in my ink testing kit is a pair of tweezers. This is useful for, or I have used it for pulling out a J bar that needs to be repositioned or needs to be pulled out of a pen for some reason. Now, this isn't the best tool for that. There are, I think on the Anderson Pens website, they sell the little scissor style tweezers. I think they're called hemostats. And that's a tool that I'm needing to get and just leave this in my ink testing kit. I use it for swatching, but something to grab a J-bar and pull it out is also a useful tool to have in a restoration toolkit. And my little toolkit that I use is, I don't know, it may have been labeled as a toolbox or a fishing tackle box. I found it on Amazon. It was super cheap, maybe like $11, around that, $10, $11. And it has been perfect. Let me show you. The little compartments are the perfect length for my pens with a little room left over. It's not super organized at the moment, but I've got my older pens in this section. I've got my pens that I'm using at the moment. I've got one of them is a little pastel pen. I got really lucky on that one. It's not super clean. It's got some stains, but it's in pretty good shape. There's some, let me see. Actually, I was going to say there's some nicks on the rim of the cap, but oh yeah, you can see it. No cracks, just some little nicks. So that's kind of something to look for on these little purse pens. And I don't know if the nurse pen, but the little pastel, really small pens, because when you post it, it posts over the lever. Sometimes you'll have cracks in the rim of the cap. So that's something to watch out for when you're bidding on one of those. But I got a nice one at a good price. It's kind of stained up, but I'm a sucker for little miniature stuff. Yeah, the threads are kind of stained up. I've got an abundance of gray pens because, I don't know, I guess maybe they're the least flashy, and whenever someone's selling a really pretty pen, so often it comes with a gray pen. And I like gray pens and all, but I just really have an abundance of them. I also ended up with a bunch of the brownish, kind of orangish brown pens and red pens. They were just so pretty. When I saw a pretty one that was in good shape, I couldn't resist bidding on it. And when I discovered a method for kind of straightening up a wonky clip. Now this looks like this clip is in its original good shape. Let me see. Now this blue one, you can see there's a little bit of a gap there. Well, the gap was much worse when I first got it, but I've kind of come up with my own method for kind of rebending a clip, and I can get it back to where it makes a nice roll stop and it doesn't look like it's bent out of shape, but it's still a little bit of a gap there, but it looks much better, and I'm happy with that amount of gap in there. And it's nice. It's close enough that I think it would work if you're clipping it into a pen case. I think it would hold it in. But that is my pen restoration kit. Before I got my box, I just had stuff all over my desk, and I told my sister, when I'm up here working and have all my stuff out on the desk, I love it so much. I told her I feel like Geppetto in his workshop, working at his little work desk. If you're into taking stuff apart and putting stuff together and fixing stuff, I encourage you to consider trying out restoring a pen. Watch some videos. I'll link some videos in the description below. One of the best resources is Alan from What I Ink. He has a series on restoring and identifying and buying Esterbrook pens. But also, Brian Anderson is a good resource. He has a website. I'll link it, describing and showing the different models of Esterbrook's. I'll also include a link to the tools and resources that Brian Anderson has put together for working on vintage pens. Who else? Oh, Grandmia pens. I'll link him. And Doug Rathbun has a series, does an ongoing series where he restores pens, and he has a video or two about Esterbrook's. I'll include those. It's good to watch a variety of resources. Everybody has their own little method for making these repairs. So just a reminder, I'm not an expert, but I'm just here to say you don't have to be an expert to get into this little area of the hobby. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.